Hello, everybody. Welcome to our 63rd webinar in our series this year of 2020, and we have a returning guest today, a returning co-host that's going to be joining us, and Kenton is back with us. Been looking forward to this. He did when he was here last time. We chatted about some different things, and we had a lot of really good feedback that people really enjoyed learning from Kenton, and so we wanted to invite him back, and hopefully we'll twist his arm and maybe get him back here at the beginning of the next year as well. We're probably going to do these webinars through spring. We don't know if we'll stay at 2 a week or if we'll go to one, early on, but we'll see. We'll see what we're going to do. We've got at the end of this presentation, we're going to talk about who is the next webinar, and I'm also going to release something we haven't done a ton. Is we're also going to talk about probably the next 5 webinars. I'm going to give you an idea. Tice was one of the ones of maybe 5 or 6 folks that really want to plan a little bit better what's coming, and so we're going to give you what we think is going to be the next 5 webinars here at the end of the webinar. So hang tight for that. It's a pretty exciting lineup, so I think you'll enjoy that. So Kenton, I appreciate you being here. Let's go ahead and get started. We're gonna, Kenton has been I've known Kenton, or at least known of Kenton for quite some time. He did a little bit of hanging out here on the West Coast, and of course, and then up here in Oregon, seen him race, seen him do some pretty cool things. He's a part of the Mazda program that my family was part of as well, and and then we got to know each other a little bit more, and actually met for the first time at I think recently, at least.
Laguna, yeah.
At Laguna recently, and when I got to travel down there for a radical event, and you were there coaching some folks, so that was kind of fun. So Ken, tell us a little bit about you. What got you to where you're at right now, and what are you doing right now?
Well, 26 years old, born and raised in California, and then moved out to Charlotte a couple of years ago to start my life with my wife, Danny, who was from the Pacific Northwest. So I actually met her at Laguna Seca during the runoffs in 2014. Yeah. But I've been racing for the last 16 years, and have been. It kind of came up into cars when I was 16, 15 years old through Skip Barber's racing school. And then, did some, got there, was a part of their scholarship shootout program in 2010, 2009 and 2010. 2009, I came in with, fresh feet and no car experience and didn't win anything. But the 2010, I did another school in that year to prepare myself, and was able to get some scholarship. And then that's kind of what helped propel myself into cars, and then learning how to drive cars from there when I was a little guy, I guess 11 years ago now, 10 years ago. But yeah, kind of went through the ranks through Mazda's scholarship system, and was thankful enough to be able to take advantage of the opportunities they had given me by providing scholarships for championships and things like that. And I went from MX5s through prototype lights into IMSA's LMPC category and whatnot. But through that, I became a Skip Barber instructor and was able to develop a private coaching clientele as well. And currently, I co-manage a team with someone I co-manage a team with my wife for someone I've coached the last few years, and we're competing in the SRO series where we did pretty well, which I'm pretty happy about because we finished on the podium and almost won some races in SRO's GT4 series. So yeah, it was good.
Stepping from and still in the seat, but stepping from the seat into the management side is got to be quite a big change for a young man. So.
Yeah. So doing both, I wouldn't be able to drive and manage if it wasn't for my wife. So.
Exactly, no doubt. Well, that's the way all of us are.
Oh yes,
don't worry.
She's awesome.
Perfect. I appreciate you being here. We had a really good time last time, and we're gonna have a good time this time. So.
For sure.
Let's go to the next slide. I'm going to jump back to the first one just for fun. What we're going to talk about today is the mental game of data, and while that's the topic, and how to not overthink your data. We've talked here in 62 previous webinars of ways to use the data, ways maybe in different ways and different forms of motorsports, learning styles, all these different things we've talked about. And what there is a function of that though that we need to keep in mind, which is that the mental game of you've got so much coming at you, and one of the things that happens to some people, it's more of a personality type, I suppose, but it can happen to all of us certainly, is to get in there and overthink some things. And when Kenton and I were talking about this, we were thinking, okay, well, what should we chat about? What's the next thing that's probably that people would like? And Kenton came up with this topic where the data is great and it's mandatory. You in this day and age, you really do have to have this. And but you can be overwhelmed by it, and you can begin to overthink it. So what we wanted to talk about was what kind of stuff should you focus on, at what times, how much of it should you focus on, and what should you not maybe focus on. And so Kenton's put together more of a discussion, but we've got a couple of examples as well, and to talk about this mental game of data. So let me jump up to the first slide, and you can reintroduce that topic a little bit if you wish as you jump in, or you can just jump in.
Yeah. So in my experience with the data and video, it's also, like, just as you guys know, it's a great tool to be able to utilize to find where you're losing time and whatnot. But as with what I've experienced in the past, there are people who are more analytical tend to overthink data a little bit more, given the fact that they love looking into it and getting to know more about what's going on. And sometimes it can lead you into just having too much to think about when you're on track. But that kind of leads me into the first bullet point of, when you're looking at the data, looking at every single corner can put you into a place where you just come up with too many bullet points to think about on the track. And something that I guess I would like to forefront that with is try to find the boulders rather than the stones that you need to turn over initially in order to find time. And when you're looking at stuff, try to find one thing that applies to multiple corners. So you can think about one thing and then it'll apply to multiple places. But the main thing is, try to find the big chunks before the little chunks, as everyone knows, and almost forget about the little chunks until you've perfected those bigger boulders that you needed to turn over. And then getting into, you might look at this bullet point and you're like forgetting about the video. You're like, what is he thinking? I don't understand. Trust me, when I wrote that too, I almost forgot. But what it is you can actually, when you're looking at the data, it tends to, if you're looking too much into the data and you get sucked into it, don't forget about the video and try to have time for the video so you can, make sure you back up what you've seen on the data in the video and vice versa, video to data. But a lot of the time it's easy to forget about the video if you're just looking at the data. So never forget about it. And then nitpicking values. And what I mean by that is there's a tendency for, I guess, again, more of the analytical type that can, look at the bar on that top right, and there's like the, feet of where you're at on the track. You're going into a break zone and you broke at, 1,300 feet. And then the next lap you broke at 1,310 feet, and you're like, oh, I went a little deeper that lap. It's like, well, don't try to get too caught up into the 10 feet or 5 feet, because the little things like that, there's always going to be some variance. So don't try to get too caught up in the little things. And as far as like little nitpicking things like that. And if you're looking at brake pressures, one lap you broke at 800 psi, and then your next lap you broke at 805 psi, and you're like, I need to hit the brake pedal harder all the time. It's like, well, again, it's it can lead you down a road that maybe that's really not a problem, and there's really other things that you need to be worrying about.
You mentioned there that second bullet point, forgetting about the video, and the point of you bring up your first tool, and sometimes you can get in there, and time, of course, is the most valuable thing at a racetrack, right? So you've got your hour to rehydrate, check your tire pressures, download your data, look at it. Sometimes you can just get into the data and you're saying don't forget about the video. We learned the other day with a great session we had with James Colburn about learning styles that there are people that video is their go-to, and this would just be flipped around, right? If your go-to is video first, don't forget about the data, right? So it's whichever one, whatever you're doing, there you have some tools available to you. Just don't forget about any of the rest of the tools, I guess is probably another way of saying that.
Yeah, exactly. And I have a note here, and when you come in from the pits and you're thinking in your head, you're like, man, I'm struggling with this one thing. You're like, I'm always getting oversteer on the exit. I can't put power down, or you're thinking about this situation in the middle of the corner that is, say you're understeering, but to go back to the point of oversteer on the exit, you're like, you constantly just complain about oversteer and oversteer and oversteer, and you're like, why? Well, I need to make a change on the car. You're like, I need to make this thing put power down better. I need to make softer or whatever it might be. But the thing is that you got to really look at the whole corner, the whole thing leading up to that point, because there can be something that might have affected the result on the exit. And if you turn in early and you get on the exit and you're understeering in the middle of the corner, the root cause might actually be that you overslowed and you're trying to be too antsy on the throttle. So it's really, you got to look at the whole corner in order to create a big picture of things. And we're going to go a little bit more over that later on in my last slide.
It's it's something we've talked about in almost all of these videos, which is, and all of our training we do, seminars and phone messages, everything is what happened, where did it happen, why did it happen? And that's a big piece of that. Why is, yeah, you got oversteer off, but is it because you drove the corner in a different way? You're apexing at the wrong time. You're picking up the throttle. You're still turning hard at past the apex, whatever it happens to be, right? So sometimes that fix, what the end result is, the fix is 3/4 of a second earlier, or even a second earlier. So, and we will, like you mentioned, we will talk deeply about that one as we go. In the chat box, folks, there's we have the link to the presentation. If some of you like to download that really quickly and have that running off the side so you can zoom in and see some different things, that's great. And we've also got a link in there to Kenton's website. Thank you, Robinson, for putting those links in there. Appreciate it. The next slide, the negatives of overthinking. When you get to a point and let's say you can look at some things. I've got a couple of examples here where we've got just tons of squiggly lines and tables and maps and all sorts of stuff. What are some of those negatives of overthinking? Where do you see that happening the most?
Overthinking, just like I said, you have too many things on your mind that you're trying to apply at one point. And if you have 3 things for each corner that you're going to be going into a session with, more often than not, you're just going to be able to do nothing with it, and you're not going to be able to actually apply any of it because you're just physically overwhelmed. You may be able to apply some of it, but I don't think you'll be able to get the most out of each individual thing that you're trying to actually fix in there. So you really actually don't end up going any faster. But a cool way to simplify some things and find areas to improve, we have this split report here generated, and it's actually a cool tool. But the thing that you have to also make sure is you generate this split report based on a track map that you've made, so that the splits are accurate. If you have a self-generated split report, sometimes the brake application, the split can end up in the middle of a brake application or halfway through a corner. And if you bring up the split report, you're going to see that there's like 40 different splits. And you look at your theoretical app and you're like, man, I'm a king. Like, look at the lap I could do. But in reality, it's impossible because of the fact that it's near impossible given the inaccuracy of the self-generated theoretical map there. So if you generate your own, it's good, and you can utilize this as an area to say, like, well, let's look at some corners where you can see maybe one lap you were like really good, and you were really fast through that one section at a time, but the trend is that you're inconsistent through that sector. So like you can dig into that corner a little bit more and understand, okay, why was this corner better, and understand why it wasn't so good before, and then go back to the video and understand, well, did I just turn it a little bit later, or did I turn a little earlier? And you can, or even, what did you do with your brake pedal and how you release the brake pedal, etc., to be able to understand the reasoning for how you got through that corner quicker for some reason. But it's a good tool to be able to look at the splits with a generated map, and use that as a tool again to find out the areas where you're a little bit inconsistent with, to be able to do that. Obviously, if there's traffic involved, it's going to be harder to utilize that as a tool, given the fact that you're going to maybe be on top of people more often. But if you're on clear track, that can be a very good tool to utilize to help yourself understand where you're weak and strong.
And I'd like to take just a second here. Kenton talks about creating your own maps and splits that maybe work better. This is this data we're looking at, and we'll be looking at most of the day today, is all Road America. So while this may look like a lot of splits, it's a very, very long track, right? And so I'm going to back up a slide. We normally don't do this too much. I think I've already done it twice. But what I did is I did take some of your data, Kenton, and we did build a map. And it's not, maybe it's not exactly what you might want, but it's here is what it looks like. Where AIM might take and create a whole bunch more splits, and all softwares do that. All they're looking at is the lateral G's. And in this case, what we've done, and I'll back up I'll go back to that other slide here in just a second, show it. But all these splits basically are where just back from where the braking started. Let's talk about going into turn one. I looked at the data. You come in here and you look at this, and where it goes from green to red right here is 35, 40 feet back from where the brakes were applied over a multiple. I look at a bunch of laps, figure out where the braking is, and then I go back a little bit. We do not want to split when you're changing some sort of inputs into the car, right? So that was what this is. And then on the way out, all of the exits of the corners are all when the hands have coming back and your lateral G's all settle at 0. And that's where we end the corner. So we start that segment where we have just before we apply the brakes, and we end it when the hands open up, and you end up with a lot less segments. Some segments look a little funny. This is a curve, but it's pretty much taken flat out. So we run it as one. You could break up the kink if you wanted to, but you can see now where we start to see the actual corners and the braking in the corner, and you can kind of see these as they go. So and if I bump up to here, you can see it in the trace, right? So here's that front straightaway. And then you can see where the brakes are typically starting to be applied, and maybe we had you have your throttle, or you have longitudinal G's, whatever it happens to be, and then we just back up a little bit, and that's where we build that split. And you can see these are shocks here, so you can't really see it, but if I had steering up there, longitudinal G, you can see that this brake right here would have been right when his hands have finally opened up back to full throttle. It's the next acceleration zone. So that's what Kenton was talking about, with segments being an important piece of this. So.
Yeah, no, and it's the only thing that I would change on how I would do the segments. It's perfect the way it is as far as how you split it up, but the colors and how I associate each one with which is actually. No, you do have it. Sorry, the way I had my colors on mine, I think, were different. The blue was the straightaways versus the green wasn't.
Personal preference. Okay.
Nah, yeah. But anyways, no, the green. That's correct. Never mind. So, never mind my thing.
The way that AIM does that, by the way, for people that haven't done that, basically greens are straightaways. They're green go acceleration. Reds are right-hand turns, and blues are left-hand turns. That's the default of the AIM software, and you can adjust that and do it in any way you would like.
Yeah. So. Yeah, and I see in the chat box, Andy Whitty posted, Whittle, my bad, Whittle. Yeah. All right, perfect. But you can create splits on an autocross with the same thought process, because there are corners that you brake for, and obviously the corners are back to back quite quickly, as I understand that as well. I've got my own little autocross car that I use, but the thing is, there still are straightaways, albeit short ones, and you just have to understand how to split that up to be able to then get the most out of seeing what you could do on splits like that as well. So hopefully that's what you're referring to, but there is still a way to generate that.
And Robinson was good enough to put a link up to a webinar that we did previously, where we actually went in and broke down and created maps using that basic technique that I just talked about, and that Kenton also uses, staying away from doing any splits in your maps when the driver is changing inputs into the car. Just a good idea.
Yeah.
You'll get much more consistent results if you don't do that. This one split report up here, as you were talking, I noticed that all of a sudden the blue equals the fastest segments for the report, and this driver had 3 in a row that were really quick. That is a trigger to me to go, hey, let's go look at lap 5 and look from corner 4, the straightaway 5, the straightaway after, and what did he do? What did we do here to accomplish that? 3 segments in a row that are fastest. That means you really got through, rolled through that area really well. Yeah. We jump into the data or into the video and try to figure out why that happened.
Okay. Yeah. And then the other part to that is, if you look at the best sectors at the end of the session, and you're like, well, why are the sectors the best at the end of the session when really you had the tires best in the first part of the session? In theory, if you did everything to the best of your ability, you would have all those sectors in the first couple laps, and then the laps beyond that would be harder for you to replicate that. So if you see a sector where you did better at the end, that might be something that you can think about on how you can maybe improve that sector by one, getting up to speed quicker in that section.
Ironically, here we are, the negatives overthinking and analysis paralysis here. And now we've spent a bunch of time on track maps and saying that it is not lost upon me, but I have always enjoyed looking at the split report, and one of the things I quickly do is I just look at where is the bulk of the blue, right? And and is it the car that has, in this particular, and this was a student that Kenton was coaching at, is the one I've got here. The student was not quick for the first 4 or 5 laps, right? There was one segment that he was quick. Everything else came about in the middle, if not the end. And is that the car is not set up to come in fast enough, or is it that the driver needs to get up to speed? It happens both ways, but more often than not, it's the driver is getting into that groove. And it's great if you've got an endurance car or something, you've got an hour-long race, to have these blues be spread all over the place is not a bad thing, which means that the driver got up to speed, the car got up to speed, everything is working well. Or if you're setting up qualifying, boy, if you're not getting your blue fastest segments here in the early part, you probably need to adjust your qualifying setup.
Yeah, so, for sure.
Okay, now that we jumped back and did that, let's jump to the next slide, and this one's got a lot, and we're going to spend a lot of time right here. We may jump in and out to some other things, but this is really the presentation and what Kenton's going to talk about the most. We were setting up a bunch of this, and I'll turn it over, Kenton, and steps to focus your thinking.
Yes, and there's a few of them here, but the first thing to talk about, really, as we have already before, data is a tool, and in order to get the most out of it, you have to interpret it correctly, and that's really what these seminars are for. So if you're a part of these seminars, more often than not, you're able to go through the data and be pretty accurate with what you see in it and whatnot. But interpreting is also another thing that a driver coach with experience may be able to really help with as well. But I know a majority of everyone here is doing it on their own, and they're looking at it themselves. The next step to and it really, I mean, if you use data, it's can. I lost my train of thought there for 1 second, but interpreting it, data is actually, sorry, now I remember it. Data is really easy to be able to make it look exactly how you want it to. And that's why it's critical to use both video and data to be able to back up what your thought process was with the data, because it can be confusing in some points. So using video to back up how you interpret the data is a good way to back up things accurately. But
we're data guys here.
yeah.
We're AIM, right? And so data is an important part of what we do, but it
Oh,
is just
completely.
a tool, right?
Yes.
It is just a tool, and it's one
important.
of the things I always like to say is you need to learn it. Number one, and that's what everybody is doing here. It's just like if you buy that wrench and you put it in your fancy toolbox and you never pull the wrench out. It's a tool that you may have, but you're not using it correctly or real well. So it is just a tool. It happens to be a very important tool in this game, but it is a tool.
Yeah, and then when we come back to how I like to do things, I like to simplify things as much as possible. And really, the theory behind driving a race car is the same from day one, where you get into driving HPD and all the way through the pro levels. It's just how you execute the fundamentals and the techniques of driving a race car. And really, if you break it down, it can be quite simple. It's the part where you might start to lose track is if you have 10 people telling you 10 different things, and that can lose track of thought there. And I watch my tongue when I say this on HPD track events, but make sure you are careful and not careful, but understand some instructors that are working at HPDs have limited experience as well, and they may have 6 months or a year of track experience, and the way they might have been taught or the way they're teaching can be tweaked as well. I mean, even for myself, I'm always learning how to teach others as well, but the thing that I'm getting to is the accuracy of limited experience may lead you in a direction that might not help. So just making sure the areas of resources that you're looking to get information from, try to find it from experienced individuals, and that'll help you build your experience and your knowledge quicker and more accurately as well. But yeah, go ahead. I think. Were you going to say something, Roger?
The understanding fundamentals, point number
yes.
2. You talk about that, and you built some foundation for what you're about to talk about here in just a second. But
yeah,
the fundamentals don't change whether or not you're a brand new driver.
Correct.
Or if you're running in Formula One, right? The physics didn't change on the face of the earth, right? So there's certain things you can do with your car, and there are some folks out there that teach you that there's a racing school line or something, or a way of doing things, and then expect you to unlearn those and learn the next level of things. And what Kenton is saying is that as he has coached people in all of these different ranges that and driven in all these different ranges, that he thinks that maybe you should be learning the right way to do it the first time.
Correct, because you can learn bad habits, and bad habits are hard to break. And one of those bad habits is early throttle application. And that's something that is taught, and it can almost be just subconscious. As you come into a corner, you come off the brake pedal and you're like, I need to be going faster. So you get on the power, and typically, if you've done that before, your hand's starting to straighten out, you're going to end up in understeer. And then sometimes when you get to the exit, if you have that understeer, you might get a snap oversteer situation. And that's where understanding the fundamentals of, I'm going to get into it now, the sequence of events occurs in the right time period throughout the corner. And a good way to know that is the steering wheel and toe theory. I always go back to steering wheel and toe theory, or string and toe theory, where you have a steering wheel and you have a string attached at the bottom of it. And you put that string and you attach it to your big toe. And when you're going in a straight line, your foot could be flat on the floor. And then when you turn into a corner, your foot has to come off of one of the two inputs. So if you're straight, you can be full throttle or you can be full braking. So as you're coming into a corner, you can be braking with 100% of what the car is capable of. And then as you start bending into the corner, you bleed those two inputs together. And then as you get to the middle of the corner, you're off all of the inputs. And then as you unwind, you're able to do the throttle application. So as you're coming into a corner and you're coming into the corner, getting to power is not going to be the thing, because you still have to add wheel. So if you have to add wheel and you get to power as you're adding wheel, you're only going to hurt yourself. So that's where understanding, when the sequence of events has to occur might lead you to being more patient with how you apply the throttle. So when you get to the exit of the corner, you actually apply the throttle at the right time. But number one fundamental, the laws of physics. Yes, I like that. That's funny. But the other thing is using the friction circle. And if you really look at a friction circle, it's really simple. When you hit the brake pedal, you're using the maximum amount of G that the tire is capable of. And then as you're coming into the corner, you want yourself to be on the edge of that friction circle the entire time coming into the apex. And as you load laterally completely. And that's that feeling that you feel when you hit on the brake pedal, and then you're coming into the corner and you're loading the right front tire as you're bleeding off the brake pedal and carrying that speed into the corner. And it's really if you've overslowed that, you hit the brake pedal, you come off the brake pedal, and then you turn. And that loading of the outside front tire, is something that you're not doing as efficiently as you could. So if you understand the fundamentals of there's a braking phase, there's a mid-corner phase, and there's an exit phase, and if you just break it up into 3 phases really, to really simplify it, you can end up knowing and getting an understanding of simply how to position the car to be able to get the braking phase to end approaching the apex and have the coast period be at the apex, and then have the throttle application be after the apex. Then you'll end up knowing what you need to do to fix early throttle application, and that's a big thing. And that's where we get into the sequence of events here. Sorry,
I find the sequence of events a very interesting thing that you've broken it down. And when you start to read that, it goes, okay, well, that makes all the sense in the world. You have just given it some titles, and then we're going to be able to chat about it. But what's real interesting is if throttle commitment is where your problem is, it may not be where your problem is. It's where where the resulting issue is happening, but it might well be the brake release, which is then setting it up to have trouble down this sequence of events. So it's just always interesting to be able to see something and then go, okay, well, what created that? What happened? Where did it happen? Why did it happen? Something we talk about here all the time. And if you're having trouble, why are you having trouble with that? Why can't you get to throttle when you think the car should take it? And it might be because of how you release the brake or that coast period or whatever it happens to be.
Yeah, and the reason I'm giving this understanding of fundamentals and sequence of events as a guideline really is it's a simple way to break down a corner to help you figure out what's wrong. You find out what the problem is, and then you backstep from there. You don't look at the problem and see it as well, that's what's wrong. You're like, I got loose here. You're like, we need to fix the car. It's like, okay, well, go a few steps further back in the corner and know, okay, maybe I broke too soft, and that's what caused the problem. Or maybe my corner entry, my hands were too quick, or whatnot. Or if you're getting to the end of the corner, end of the brake release process, and you get to the apex and you're like, oh, frick, I overslowed. It's like, well, where were your eyes, and what were you doing with your left foot or right foot, depending on which foot you use for the brake, and where were your eyes at when you were releasing the brake pedal, because that has a really big power of how you float speed into the corner is exactly how you release the brake pedal. If you start that release process a little bit sooner, can help you not overslow. And a lot of people can overslow by literally just clinging to too much brake pressure for too long into the corner and then pop off the brake pedal, and because of low eyes. But an example that I was going to give in my mind was many of you know Laguna Seca in turn 2, that double apex left-hander is a long one. And when you're coming into the brake zone of turn 2, a lot of people just stare at the apex because that's what they're looking at. Well, that's what they're focused on. But if you get your eyes up past the apex, is really where the magic happens. And the problem that I see, more often than not, is they overslow the entrance to turn 2, and it's because when you look at the apex, the corner seems really tight, and that's the problem. Is if you are forced into a sense of, oh my gosh, this corner is way tighter than I think it is, you're going to end up slowing down more than you need to. Versus if you get your eyes up past the apex and you start looking at the second one, well, before you get to the first one, it's going to make yourself see this corner as a much bigger arc. And you know that there's going to be more road for you to be had. And then your brain is just going to tell you, you can carry more speed. And it's just because of where your eyes are placed. And that's what's going to help just fix your left foot or your right foot, depending on which foot you use for braking. And that's what's going to control how you release the brake pedal to help the car roll into the corner. So that's one thing. It's like, why did it happen? And what was the phase in the events that you can fix to help that? And one thing that to go a little bit deeper into that is, when you're focusing on rolling speed into the corner, that's where the time is rolling speed. And when obviously condensing the brake zone is important as well. But if it's at the sacrifice of rolling speed, then it can hurt yourself more than what you've gained in the brake zone. And something that I like to do and how I like to start out, I like to start a little conservative on the brakes so I can focus on rolling speed into the corner. So if the braking marker is the 2 and you can't go any deeper than the 2 board, I start at the 2 1/4 or 2 1/2, and then worry about how I'm rolling into the corner by controlling the brake release. Ultimately, the release comes at the ultimate release point comes, to wherever it is, but the point at that point comes at the same point most cases. But how you release the brake pedal to that point is how you carry speed into the corner. And that's, if you get your rolling speed right, then you can work on condensing the brake zone to then know, okay, did I overcharge the brake zone or did I undercharge the brake zone, based on what you now know is the correct rolling speed through the corner. So I start with rolling speed and then condensing. But,
interesting. You start at the middle of the corner and kind of work your way back.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I'm not a driver of road racing, so it's something that I have not done, although I've worked a lot in this world. It's to me very interesting that it's and you wonder why it is so hard to go fast and why so few people are actually doing this extremely that last 5% of the group. It's because this is very complex and very hard to do correctly, and there's so much to stitching together a perfect corner. And then turn 2 is different than turn 3, and how you would apply these different things, and then using data to figure out where did I do that, the video, the data, your memory, and then adjusting those things in real time. And then the track changes and your tires wear down and you got less fuel, and all these things are happening to you guys all the time. And it's just a very interesting that you thought you were coming here for a data lesson, and you're getting a very, very strong and very good coaching lesson as well here today from Kenton. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks. But it's funny, I mentioned, hey, don't overthink things, and I say, there's these million things that you need to think about.
We knew as we were chatting before we did this, we knew we would do this, right? Because it is it's a passion for you, and it's a passion for all of us, and why we're telling you to not overthink it. And then there are just so many cool things to talk about that we knew we would do this. So, oh well.
Yeah, but the point that I'm trying to make with understanding fundamentals is that if you know the fundamentals, it's really simple. And then you can apply those fundamentals easily. There's only really, a couple things that you need to worry about coming into the corner to be able to help your rolling speed. And it's really just one, braking a little conservatively, and then worrying about how you release the brake pedal and having your eyes into the corner. It sounds like someone lost audio there.
You and I are okay, I believe. So
okay, I can hear you. So,
okay. But and I can hear you. So everything should be fine.
Okay, cool.
So you get the schedule events kind of broke down, and then now we got to go down to continuing to work on fixing things, right?
Yes.
One of the topics here that you talk about, point number 4 here, knowing when to do your skill building. I think that's a great connection to all of this, and it's something that I have not heard talked of quite a bit. Explain what you're thinking about there.
So what I'm talking about is, say you've gotten through your first couple years of driving, and there's a point of knowing how you feel in the car, and that feeling of having confidence in your car control and your ability, and if the car steps out, being able to correct it. And that's kind of like step one of, like, if you aren't able to control the car when it steps out, you need to, try to get to a controlled environment to be able to understand how to fix that problem of, hey, maybe I'm tentative to get the car out of shape on a track because, one, you don't want to end up in a wall on a racetrack, and that fear alone can really hurt you. And being able to build your confidence in a controlled environment like a skid pad, in a car that is like a Miata or whatever, it is a good environment to learn how to control slides. In a way that I like to do skid pad days is really as a corner where you're coming into a skid pad and you're not just going around in circles, but you come into a skid pad as a 180 to be able to carry speed into the corner and match your speed at 40 miles an hour, and then change what you do with your hands that makes the car do things. If you turn in slowly, you'll be able to carry good speed through the corner, versus if you turn in abruptly, you might induce an oversteer situation. Or if you turn in slowly and apply the brake pedal, you might actually get oversteer as well. But the thing that hasn't changed is your speed. You literally have been doing 40 miles an hour every time, but what you do with your inputs at that point can determine what happens with the car. And then how you counter steer is what will really help as well. How quickly you put in steering wheel input will control how much steering and wheel input you get to counteract the slide. But other things, karting, and then using a simulator, things like that. One, it's just karting can help you build up, hand speed and racecraft as well. But sim racing, if you can, if you have a good setup that can help you, you actually feel what's going on in the sim. If you have a connection and the sim is helpful to you, being able to practice good habits on there is also a good tool, because you can just drive more. And being able to practice good habits will then be able to then be put forth into real life as well. And that's where the sim can be helpful, is just practicing good habits on where your eyes are placed, how you come off the brake pedal, etc. But yeah,
we're going to talk more about sim racing here in just a little bit when we go. We're going to go take a look at a video that Kenton put together. It's off the sim. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Mentally focused.
Yes. So being mentally focused, and this is a cool tool that something that I learned from a very smart guy, Dr. Jacques Dallaire, Performance Thinking. I would like to see how many people in the chat box have actually heard of this book. If you guys want to put it in the chat box, that would be great to see. But this book is called Performance Thinking, and it is a book that is good to, one, teach you how to think. But one of the main things that Jacques Dallaire talks about is A times B equals results. And it's something I've talked with him directly about, and is a really cool thing. And A times B, and I'll explain what that is. Results is obviously what you get out of it. But A, is everything that's under your control, and that's all you should be focused on. And B is everything that's out of your control. And if you're putting any of your energy into thinking about B or results, that's going to affect and take away from, the ultimate end game. And if you just focus on A, which is the perfect application of the fundamentals and the technique, approaching every corner, hitting your brake pressure, having the nice smooth release, getting into the corner and getting off the corner, all these things, if you just focus about literally taking things one corner at a time and not thinking about results, or that right rear feels a little funny. Just being able to focus on how to drive around a problem, and how to execute each corner perfectly with whatever problems you may have, to be able to get the most out of a race. It can be really helpful. And something that I had, and something that clicked with me, was a situation that maybe you guys can relate as well, is at MX5 Cup 20, and it's a clear moment in my brain that I was like, MX5 Cup 2014, and it was between race 1 and race 2, and I actually, Dr. Jacques Dallaire was there, and I actually had this conversation with him. But in race 1 on grid, we were a couple points away. I was a couple points away out of the championship, and I was thinking about, okay, I need to think about I need to get this many points in this race to be able to get to the championship. And it's like race 2, the event 2 of the championship. So it's not like we're deep into this thing at all. But yeah, I was just thinking about, everything but driving on grid before race 1, rather than just thinking about getting to the race and figuring it out as you go, but executing when you're in the race, and just leaning on the experience that you have. But after the race, things, I got on the podium, thankfully, and things were still okay, but the race went terrible in my opinion, because I dropped to 6th because I made a stupid move, and I made a mistake. I was dropping wheels everywhere, and I was just driving like a donkey. And it just wasn't, it wasn't good. I wasn't my normal self. And I could have won the race. I had good pace. And then race 2 came along, or in between race 1 and race 2, I talked to Dr. Jacques Dallaire, and he was like, what were you thinking? I was like, I was thinking about everything, but actually driving at the point, because I was thinking about points. And when I got to race 2, all I started to focus on was just driving. And we walked away, won the race, and it turned the most consistent laps I ever turned. And from that point on, I was like, proof is in the pudding. Like it's amazing what your brain can do to take yourself out of the situation. And yeah,
A plus B. So then if you're having to add together some stuff that you're thinking about that's not related to your actual driving at the time, you're using up that bubble of amount of information you have, ability to do things in the car. Maybe it's only a 10th, maybe it's 100th, maybe it's missing by a couple of feet on an apex, but it's a deal.
Yep, exactly. And moving forward off of that mental side, like that's like critical, is just being able to focus your thinking one corner at a time, and not thinking about what you're going to have for dinner later. But the other thing is, when you're coming into a session, only focus on 3 things. If you think about more than that, it's going to overwhelm you. And that goes back to my first slide of, don't look at every corner, and don't try to apply every corner with different things. Just focus on 3 things, and it can be general things, where it's, say you're soft on the brake pressure. I just need to hit the brake pedal hard in all these hard brake zones, things like that. And that's going to apply to different corners and whatnot. If you just have a fundamental technique that, you need to fix, that can also apply to different corners. But the thing that you want to try to do is, obviously, one thing you want to try to pick a commonality that you see across multiple corners that can maybe apply to set different corners as well. But main thing is focus on 3 things that are going to get the most out of the session for you. And it could be just 3 corners as well, and that's okay. But the last thing that I have on there, and it's something that I've kind of hinted at the whole time, is feel. You've got to be able to feel the car underneath you. You've got to feel what the front end's doing in order to have confidence with the car. And if you don't feel what's going on, that's where you're going to have to do some skill building exercises to maybe feel what's going on underneath you. If you're numb to the car and numb to everything, it's going to be really, really hard for you to apply the sequence of events and the fundamentals of what's going on. And that's where feel comes in, and you can't just rely on squiggly lines to do that. And that's where you've got to be able to feel those things, and the friction circle of putting the car on its nose, and that feeling that you get of of impending lockup. And as you come into the corner, you're leaning on that front tire, and you're taking advantage of both inputs rolling into the corner, and then you get to the middle of the corner and dancing the car with either understeer or oversteer, or just a perfect car that's just on freaking rails. But the thing that you have to know is just feeling what's underneath you.
And feeling if you're overdriving it, feel if you're underdriving it, the whole thing, right? The feel is such a critical thing to racing cars. And it's funny how, as you get into it, again, I'm not a road racer, but I off-road raced for years. And those days when you go out there and no matter what you do, it is doing it correctly, right? You've just got that feel, you're on point. Sometimes you're looking at your left front tire and you're trying to get it to be right in a certain spot. I'm racing on dirt, right? And yet I'm making these minute changes, and the car is doing exactly what you want, because you do have that feel. You understand what the car wants and is asking.
Yeah.
Kind of funny.
I would love to take a look at that video that we have pulled up.
Perfect. Let's do that right now. Let's reshare that, since we've kind of finished up on that slide. Let's do this. And explain what we're looking at first, and then we'll go ahead and start it.
So what we're looking at here is one. I do like to sometimes make videos with iRacing to help one just know the sequence of events for this track. But the other thing here is there's a telemetry box here right in front of us, and the green line is actually, it's like a data trace, really. And it's a green line that is full throttle. As you can see, 100% on that green bar on the right side, and that is a green line that indicates full throttle. And the center line there is a steering trace. So as your hands are straight, obviously it's not going to move. And then there is a red trace at the very bottom there that shows zero pressure. Obviously, as we're full throttle, we are not going to have brake pressure. And as we're going through the corner, this is going to change, and you'll see essentially a whole data trace be as a recorded thing that happens as we go. And the point of this is just going to show you kind of what I'm talking about with the sequence that occurs throughout the corner. And
this is the same thing that all of our users typically will have in their SmartyCam video, right? They
of course,
if you don't have these elements, these graphical elements of, maybe you can see the steering wheel, or maybe you put the steering angles in there, your brake, your throttle, and then roll yourself the video like we're about to do, and run through the corner and take a look at what you're doing with your hands versus where the car's at, even lateral G's if you want them, all of those things.
Yeah, totally. This is just a tool that I had at my disposal for the sim stuff. So
it's very cool. It was available to us very quickly and easily this morning, so we were able to bring it up and show it. So okay.
Go ahead and we'll play go ahead and play it, and we'll stop it at the exit of the corner.
Okay, so he's coming in, and you can see, and I'll pause it really quickly here just in just a second. Right there, I'm going to pause it there first. You can just so everybody gets a good eye on what's happening here. The green is the throttle, the red is the brake, and we've got this when he lifted off the throttle, and you can see he's just starting to turn in, as we can see visually as well, right?
Yep.
So let's go ahead and roll that maybe down to the apex. We'll take another quick look at it and have you talk about what it is.
Yeah, and we're at the apex.
So give us a quick talk about what you see here fully in what we're talking about.
So the thing that we like to talk about, and we just almost executed the friction circle in a very good way, where we look at the initial brake pressure, and it's hard on the brake application, and then you smoothly release the brake pressure as you start coming into the corner, to obviously reduce lockups. But the other thing is, as you start bending the car into the corner, you can see with wheel input and brake release, you can see the two almost going hand in hand with how you release the brake pedal and how you add wheel into the corner as well. And that happens at a very smooth way. And as you get to the apex, obviously we're off all the inputs right now to get the car to carve as much as possible, to take as much lateral grip and make the right front and the right rear do as much work as possible, and to get the car turned. And if you put the power on right now, it's going to, before the car is turned completely, it's gonna not turn as much.
We have a question, and we are starting to run a little out of time, but it's a question that comes up a lot, and I think this is a perfect spot for just to give us some clarification. You just mentioned there's no inputs, right? You called it coasting. Some people call it rolling. The mid corner. And the question is coasting. From karting, we know that you steer best when they roll, but he talks about coasting, and if you're coast, you're losing time, and you should be braking or accelerating, and that may well be there is probably some truth of that in karting, a little bit more so. But just clarify for a minute that there is a point in time that we call it coasting, but in reality, it's a term that some people really dislike strongly. Our good friend Peter, it's something that we don't like too much, but you're not really coasting. It's your hands and your feet maybe aren't doing much, but you are in a heavy lateral G at that point and rolling through. And if you can have a maximum there, if you're not doing some of the other things. So what's your thoughts on the word coasting and what you're doing there in the middle of the corner?
Well, if you can imagine, coasting is just a small period of time between the brake and the throttle. If there is no time between if there is no time or no gap between the brake and the throttle as you are going from the release to the throttle application, you're not letting the car rotate in the middle of the corner. It can really just upset the car if you're trying to jump onto the power right as you come off the brake pedal. And I do use the term coasting, but you obviously have to roll the speed to force your throttle application to be later in the corner. If you feel like you need to jump on the power, it's because you didn't roll enough speed.
Yeah. Some people will go so far as to say only use the term coasting here, where that transition between brake and throttle. That's where we should be using the term. We should be using the term rolling here in the middle, because the car really is doing a bunch of things. It's not like it's coasting is not is a term that some people think that you're not doing anything. Well, you're really doing a lot at this point. So
exactly. I mean, and you can play it through here, but
okay, let's go ahead and get up here to just the exit so we can see the whole transition now, where you were onto the brake, off, you did the steering, and now you're starting to that throttle and then throttle commitment, the two of the steps you talked about in your steps.
Yeah, exactly. And that's that. But I know there's one other corner. I don't know if you have enough time here.
Yeah. Let's go up here to 13.
But that's kind of your typical corner where, the minimum speed is at the apex and essentially the throttle application comes at the apex, but you've got to force that brake release to roll to be able to allow the throttle application to be forced into the corner later by rolling the speed into it. But we'll go into turn 13.
13 at COTA, everybody. If you've been there before, this is where we're at. We're going to play this one and we'll go all the way to the exit and then we'll pause it there, or that second corner, right?
Yep. Yeah, and this is 12. And as we're coming into 13, the minimum speed is actually after the corner here. So the throttle application comes well after the apex, and that's what we'll look at, and we'll pause. And if you would like to rewind as you get to the apex of turn 13, not the second apex, but the first apex of 13.
That's coming up. Yeah. Here, right?
And I'm saying that the sequence of events, pause right here. The sequence of events here is actually shifted into the corner. And if you think about every apex curbing as an apex, sometimes that could force you into you have to really think of as an apex curb as a clipping point in one way, and the apex is actually after the clipping point. But another way to think about it is that the minimum speed needs to be later in the corner, because there is, in this section, it's a tighter corner, and it continues to almost tighten up past this apex curbing or clipping point. So you need to have the car turn later in the corner. So therefore, you need to be later in the throttle. So you got to force that. Again, that throttle application to be later in the corner so you don't understeer wide off of this corner. So controlling, again, the sequence of events that occur in this corner to be a later throttle application, but what you do with your brake foot to force that to occur later is the thing that you want to think about here. And releasing the brake pedal just a little bit sooner to roll the speed into the corner to force that minimum speed to be past the apex. to help the car turn towards the second one.
So you're still doing those same 7 things. It's just when is it happening for different styles of corners? Always an interesting thing. This is not an easy game, right?
Yep. Yeah. But if you understand the fundamentals and the techniques that are involved, it's easy for you to diagnose each corner based on the things that you've learned. And if you just think about the fundamentals and the techniques that are involved with going through a corner quickly, you just apply them to each corner, and really each corner is very similar to the next. If it's a tight corner or mid-speed corner or a high-speed corner, you approach each low-speed, mid-speed, and high-speed corner of any track really somewhat similarly. And that's where, if you can make the association between corners, it can be easy for you to pick up new tracks.
Absolutely. So everything you just talked about was we condensed into that short video, sim video, but video nonetheless, and talked about those. So I appreciate that. Anything else you want to add here before we kind of start to close it out, Kenton?
No, that's really it. It's just knowing when to skill build and knowing when you need to go to a skid pad with a proper instruction, and feeling when you are limiting yourself, because just doing track days all the time may actually not be the quickest way to learn something. Maybe you skip a few track days and use that money towards a skid pad day that maybe progresses you quicker one day than over the course of 5 events. Yeah. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. Skill building and then having the knowledge of those fundamentals will make you a better driver.
Perfect. I appreciate that. That was very interesting. Lots of good comments in the chat box and some of the questions.
Yeah.
One of the questions.
One corner at a time as well. One corner at a time, using your brain and focusing solely on that. But anyway, sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. One of the questions that came up was the track map. I'm going to jump back really quickly before we jump. Let me see if I can get it to go back there. Somebody talked about, a little hard, track maps in the AIM software. It's a hard-coded split wherever we put the start-finish line. So because of that, while yes, this is a big long straightaway back here on the backside, we break the front straightaway into 2 pieces. If that is bothersome to you and from a data standpoint, go ahead and move your start-finish line down here to this point where you have found that your hands open up every time, and put that as your start-finish line. The times then won't match exactly, maybe with the timesheets. They'll be very close because it's a full-on straightaway all the way up there. But some people really do like it to be down here. But us as a company, we have just made the decision that we're going to put all of our track map start-finish lines at the official start-finish line, and then you guys need to adjust them if it doesn't bother you for sharing data or for other reasons. Putting it down here kind of takes care of that little problem. So yeah. I thought it was a good question, and I just wanted to make sure we kind of covered it.
One thing to add to that as well is it's nice to sometimes have that start-finish line be just before pit entry, because on a long lap like that, you may not need to finish the lap to know if the lap is going to be good or not. So having that lap before pit entry would be actually sometimes helpful,
because you can run your hard lap and come straight into the pits, get your tire pressures, temperatures, make your adjustments, get right back out and be up to speed when you come back here to take the green for your next practice run. Yeah, good comment as well. I appreciate everybody coming. We'll have this up on YouTube just as quickly as we can. We have about 129 videos out there. It's we're stacking them up pretty quickly. We did take our first Tuesday, Thursday off on Tuesday, and it felt a little bit weird, but since March, we've been doing one of these every single Tuesday and Thursday, and I know got a couple of notes from folks. Are we having a webinar today? And yeah, it was. I didn't want to send a note out to everybody, letting people know that we were not going to have one on Tuesday, but we did talk about it a couple of webinars ahead of then. So, who is next? Customer support, AIM being this is what we do. Give us a holler, look for us at the tracks. We have guys out at tracks even as we speak. So give us a call if you have any questions. We're here to help you. The next webinar, and I've got another slide right behind this one. We have the next 5 guys, but let's talk about this one first, and then let me share you some pretty exciting news of who's coming up. beyond Joe. Joe Hall has been a friend for a long time, and known Joe, been a name dealer for about as far back as I can remember. He works much with other systems as well. Joe is the owner of Digital Competition Systems, and Joe is going to come in and give us some tips and tricks from a pro data guy. Joe, his full-time job is doing data acquisition, lots and lots of road racing. But one of the things that I'm interested in chatting with Joe a little bit is he does a lot of work in ARCA and NASCAR. He's in Charlotte, neighbor to Kenton, but maybe not exactly a neighbor, but in the area. And so Joe's going to come join us. And I've been asking Joe for quite a while to come join us. And he is a very busy man. He's going to be coming back straight from the, I think, Trans Am race at COTA. And we're going to chat a little bit, and then we're going to fire up and do our webinar. So looking forward to having Joe here. Just tons of information, tons of experience with Joe, and it's going to be fun. So let's talk about who's coming up. Here is who's going to be joining us over the next few webinars. I have really hesitated to do this, to give a longer picture view of who's coming, and it's really because of this year with the compressed season in motorsports. We needed to be giving all of our co-hosts or guests as much leeway as they can, because you're getting called out to races, 3 or 4 days ahead of an event or a test or something that's been made available to them. So they were not able to maybe make it as quickly, stay as on schedule as much as they would like. Things are kind of slowing down a little bit, so I'm gonna feel a little bit more comfortable of telling you who we have coming up. We've always planned months out, but I think we're gonna be able to hold these guys. It's the end of the season. Look at the lineup that we have coming up. This will be great fun. Of course, Joe on Tuesday. Thursday, Chris Brown, the author of Making Sense of Squiggly Lines. Chris is we're kind of following that same trend of trying to talk with all of the folks out there that have written some books about things like this. So we're going to have Chris here on Thursday, November 12th. He's going to talk about some of his engineering stuff that he does. He's a working data guy, engineer. And then, of course, he wrote the book, Making Sense of Squiggly Lines. So we're going to talk with Chris and have a great time. It's again, he was super busy, and we were finally, as the season is slowing down, we're finally able to get him. So. And then Tuesday the 17th. This is one I've been working on a long time. I had some help from several folks that helped me get this done. I talked with Buddy Fay who wrote the original data book called Data Power, using race car data acquisition. Buddy's going to join us on Tuesday, November 17th. I've been looking forward to that, and going to be a good time. The book, while it was probably the very first book that was written on the topic that I know of, the core fundamentals of that book are just still very powerful and very relevant to what we do today. So looking forward to having Buddy join us on the 17th. The very next Thursday, Jeff Brown was a co-author of a book called Inside Racing Technology, where they dig into suspension shocks. That is kind of the part that Jeff was a big part of. But he is a world-class racing engineer out there at working full-time. And so Jeff has been wanting to come on with us for quite some time, but his schedule was just such that it was just very difficult. So Jeff's going to come join us on the 19th, and I'm looking forward to that. And then Jonathan Goring, multiple driving championship Spec Miata SCCA runoff winner, does a lot of coaching like Kenton as well. He's going to be back with us for his second time on November 24th, and that's the Tuesday before Thanksgiving here in the States. And we will not be having one on that Thursday, which is Thanksgiving here. So these are the next 5 that we have coming up. I think these are a very strong lineup. If you have the opportunity, let folks know that what's coming. There's a link there in the slide. You guys get that link every time you get emails from me as well. So share that out on your social media and who's coming, and let everybody know what we're doing here. So it would be great. I appreciate it. We did go just a tick long, but not terrible. We did okay. Here's some contact information. Kenton just shared just tons of great knowledge about this. Yeah, we talked about data quite a bit, and everything we talked about was touched back into data. But Kenton gave a lot of coaching techniques information there as well. If you want to get a hold of Kenton, there's an email address, a website that you can get to. It was linked in the chat box earlier. There's my contact information as well. If we said anything that you have a few more questions on, we got to, I think, most of the questions that were sent into the question and answer box. So, Kenton, I appreciate it. Is there anything else you might want to add before we call it a day?
Nah, I'm good. Thank you very much for having me, and we'll see you in the next one.
Now, I was going to say, I'm going to twist your arm. We'll have you come back in another, maybe during the winter again before things get too crazy for you. But thanks a lot, Kenton. I know it's a lot of work to prepare for these. I know you spend a lot of effort into these, and it certainly shows, and lots of good information shared with all of our folks. So we do appreciate that. Thanks everybody for coming, and we'll see you on next Tuesday.